Well, welcome everyone to We Can't Wait's event on hacking philanthropy and investment to solve our climate crisis. First, to give you an overview of the evening, our founder, Felix Kramer, will give a quick intro. We'll have about a 25-minute presentation, a few words from partners and collaborators, and a Q&A section. And we're very excited to share We Can't Wait's possibilities and our unique approach to solving the climate crisis. We'll hope you will join us in this. And we're very glad that you're here. Felix, take it away.
Well, thank you to all those who I know and who I don't know. I'm really glad you're here. And the story begins about 1.5 years ago when my wife, Rochelle Lefkowitz, and I recognized we could give away much more money. And that led me to think maybe I wasn't the only one in that position. And I looked it up. I did some research. I discovered there are 50,000 people in the Bay Area with assets over $10 million. Now, we're small potatoes compared to them, but it started me thinking that maybe I could have some influence on other people by saying, I can't wait to give away a lot. And that turned into this project. I knew I was heading in a good direction when I saw that Martin Luther King had told some stories in a book in 1964 called We Can't Wait. So today you'll hear about how far we've come. And I hope this is the moment for me when I can transition from being a founder, an active founder, to being an advisor and a networker. So I can turn this over to a full team with an entrepreneurial executive director. So first, our team will describe our unique approach for individuals, organizations, and investors, what we've accomplished, and even some near-term opportunities. Our small our small team has had an employment model where they each work half-time, and they like the flexibility that they can also devote time to consult on other mostly climate projects. On the lower left there, I've worked on several projects with Mike Milkey. He introduced the idea of applying our time, treasure, and talent to act at the scale, scope, and speed our times demand. He just started a full-time job, and he continues as a senior advisor. I didn't have to sell Kimberly D.C. Schroeder on the idea of recognizing when we are and normalizing acting from urgency. She co-initiated We Can't Wait, and she can do almost anything. Now she's shoehorning in an MBA program in design strategy at the California College of the Arts. When I hear about a person or group in the climate world, usually Daisy Pistiline knows them. She's a powerful strategist and a pollinator across many networks on policy, investing, philanthropy, and more. And now here's Kimberly again for our presentation.
Thanks, Felix. So welcome again to We Can't Wait's gathering on hacking philanthropy and investment to solve our climate crisis. As Klaus Schwab, the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, states, we are at a tipping point in our efforts to put the planet back on track to meet our climate ambitions. To reach the speed and scale required to heal the Earth systems, we need to unlock not only private capital and government funds, but also the philanthropic sector as a truly catalytic force to achieve the necessary acceleration. And on that photo, that is not a filter. Those of us in the Bay Area will remember that the sky really was that orange. As everyone here knows, we're in a climate crisis. However, what's less commonly known is that the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees isn't good enough. That is not a livable future. We'll likely lose our coral reefs, have massive displacement of refugees, and climate patterns will further destabilize, causing extreme droughts and floods. Historically marginalized communities are being hit first and worst. To restore a livable future, we need to reverse global warming and be carbon negative, aka climate positive. Scientists said we have 10 years to solve this 2 years ago. So what's the current status? Despite recent increases, overall climate funding is still far less than what is needed to meet the climate crisis in the next 8 years. In 2022, climate organizations received $10 billion or only 2% of global philanthropic funding. In the US, it was even less, only 0.4%. And while investment in climate tech is on the rise, totaling 50 billion or 25% of global venture in 2022, it's not enough, and it's trending downwards this year. In addition to venture, if we factor in renewable energy, agriculture, and other infrastructure investments, last year's total was closer to 600 billion. However, this is still far short of the estimated 4 trillion needed annually by 2030 to truly address climate change. That includes funding for adaptation and resilience. However, climate loss and damage is still above this 4 trillion number. The world currently spends about 2 trillion a year on militaries, and developed countries spend trillions of dollars on COVID-related relief for their citizens. So if we decide to do it, this 4 trillion is possible. Climate change connects to everything. We know this: health, power, food, equity. 98% of philanthropic funding is going to other areas. But if we don't invest in climate, all of our other challenges will only be exacerbated in the future. So by bringing in more funding now to climate, we can address the climate multiplier before everything else gets worse. As this graph from One Earth shows, we need to reach net zero by 2040. That's this peak right here on the gray line, in order to have a chance of staying below 1.5 degrees. And that means anthropogenic emissions need to peak here in 2025. Investing drives the economy. Those with wealth and means must lead the way and be on an even faster timeline to get us there. So to reach net zero by 2040, investing must actually become climate positive by 2035. Investing's got to be faster, got to lead the way. And now I will pass to my colleague, Daisy.
Hi, everyone. So as Kimberly said, there are some big numbers of the dollars needed to address climate change. And we're talking about huge sums of money, but we're also talking about a huge gap between where we are now and where we need to be in terms of both investment and in terms of many types of investment, rather. As you can see on this chart, which comes from the PricewaterhouseCoopers State of Climate Tech report this past year, this chart shows that while we are getting more investment coming into climate tech, particularly in venture capital, we've gotten close to between 25 and 30% of all venture capital going into climate tech over the last few years. However, we're also seeing a tapering off of overall venture capital, as this red line shows, and with that, a tapering off of investment in climate tech. As well, there are some large funds that have been raised, and yet the deployment of that capital is slowing down. But it isn't important that we invest just more money. We need more money going into climate tech investing. We also need to look at where we're investing it, though, because where we invest it really matters in terms of the climate outcomes, or what we're calling the climate ROI of these investments. As Kimberly showed on that graph, to get to net zero, we have a very short timeline. And in order to do that, we need to ramp up investments much sooner than 2040 even, in order to get to net zero. If we're going to reduce emissions quickly, though, we need to ensure that what we're investing in are companies that are focused on the greatest emissions mitigation potential. Companies that are addressing the industries on this chart that show where all the emissions globally come from. And anyone who's making a climate investment needs to be thinking not just about their economic returns, but also about the climate returns of their investment, laid out by a lot of clear scientific analysis. So that means that portfolios can't just align with being less bad. They can't just cut out the bad things. They actually have to become climate positive by investing in solutions that mitigate these emissions. And right now, it's even more important that we invest more money and that we invest it more focused on climate solutions, because we have a historic opportunity that has been dubbed Climate Tech 2.0. Unlike Climate Tech or Clean Tech 1.0, there is a huge infusion of public and private capital, but this time we have to succeed. We don't have time left to address the climate crisis. If we fall short again, we will be too late. Just like in 2009, though, we are facing an economic slowdown. But we need to implement the lessons that we've learned from the last go-round. We need to bolster the markets, invest for climate ROI as well as economic ROI. We need to fight back against fossil fuel power, and we need to deploy. We need to deploy capital, we need to deploy climate solutions, and we need to deploy innovation. So the We Can't Wait model is seeking to address some of the concerns from the last clean tech investment period by implementing a novel structure to investing in climate solutions. We'll be offering investment opportunities in scalable, impactful companies that have real climate impact, and then pairing these investment opportunities with a philanthropic portfolio of aligned nonprofits that cover 3 crucial areas of work as outlined here. So organizations addressing policy and regulatory enablement, workforce development, and then community engagement that will be building an enthusiastic consumer base and communities that are in love with climate solutions. So together, these organizations' work will help to de-risk the investments and ensure the health of the overall market ecosystem in which these companies can grow and thrive. First of all, we're focusing on regulations and policy because, as I'm sure most of you realize, these have the capacity to shape and move markets incredibly. The laws, regulations, subsidies, and taxes that we put into place have immediate and long-lasting impacts on industries and the broader markets. By investing in the organizations that are doing this work in the particular sector of the companies we're investing in, we'll be ensuring that sectoral markets remain strong and that they grow into new geographies and are defended from attacks from other industries, particularly the incumbent industries. As just one case study of why policy is so important to invest in, here in California, we have an excellent example. In 2006, here in California, as I'm sure you all know, we passed a landmark climate bill, AB 32, which passed cap and trade policy and called for cutting emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and moving to 100% clean energy by 2045. This policy was passed by a big tent coalition of climate advocates, environmental justice activists, community groups, business organizations, labor, etc. Lobbying overall for this passage cost less than $100 million over 2 years. And yet, what we have seen over time has been that funds generated by cap and trade have yielded the availability of close to $20 billion over the last, 17 years. And this has also led to the creation of almost 3 million California jobs and green occupations today. So as you can tell, that is quite a bit more money than was spent. And even though there was a need to defend AB 32 in 2010 when Prop 23 came forward, the overall spending on Prop 23 was about $125 million. So still far, far less than the $20 billion that we're seeing in public funding generated by this passage. So similarly, right now we have an amazing opportunity that is national in scope, based on this decade-long opportunity that's been unleashed with the recent passage of 3 important federal climate bills: the Infrastructure and Investment in Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. The official 3-year lobbying spend on the passage of these bills is very hard to total, but it totaled less than $1 billion overall, based on kind of some, ballpark figures. Though that doesn't include the further amounts of money spent on 501c3 eligible campaigns and communications, we still see that the total of about 1 billion is magnitudes of scale less than the resulting amount of public investment dollars that are now successfully unleashed by the passage of these bills for the clean energy transition. Additionally, the passage of these bills and the investments that are coming from them are leading to hundreds of billions more in private sector investment, which is not on this slide, but we know is coming. But it all is only going to happen if we do this right. So what we have ahead of us is a further need for advocacy to ensure proper design and implementation of policies and programs that will deploy these funds at the state and local level. We have a 50-state problem now. As you can see, there are multiple entities at each state that need to be watched and advocated before. Our friends at the Energy Foundation have identified the need for about $3 to $5 million annually over the next decade to do this well, and to ensure that these funds are deployed in the best way possible and captured by local and state entities and companies. So here at We Can Wait, we're hoping to be part of solving this problem. Also, on the next of our three prongs is workforce development. We all know, we've probably seen the headlines, that we're facing a bottleneck in terms of the workforce needed to deploy clean energy and climate solutions. We need more electricians. We need more auto technicians trained in EVs. We need a whole lot of workforce that we don't currently have. But we also have the capacity to replace all of the jobs that will be lost by this energy transition if we do training and retraining of people properly. And we're seeking to invest in the nonprofit entities that are going to be doing this work as well. And then thirdly, the third piece of our nonprofit philanthropic strategy is investing in community engagement entities. So we know that to change everything, we need everyone. We need to ensure that we have communities full of excited, enthusiastic adopters of climate solutions who can serve as the consumers of what these companies are going to be creating, and then also offering feedback on what more is needed and how to do it better to these companies. This is a unique opportunity to invest in making sure that markets are strong and vibrant and that all communities have the access to the solutions that will be provided by these investments. So currently we've been putting together a portfolio of investment opportunities that we're really excited about. First of all, we started out by looking at a few companies in the building decarbonization space. We know that the building sector is close to 40%, depending on how you calculate it, of all emissions. And so we wanted to tackle some of those by starting out with this sector. First of all, we have an exciting allocation in a current round by Block Power. You've probably heard of Block Power. They've been getting tons of press and media attention over the last couple of years. They're electrifying homes across America, particularly in low and moderate income communities, through an innovative public-private partnership model. And then one of the technologies that Block Power is actually deploying is Harvest Thermal, which we're really excited about because it's a really innovative technology that uses your water heater as a thermal battery and then allows for load shifting on the electrical grid. So it addresses a number of problems that the society is kind of facing with the clean energy transition at once. Third in this portfolio is a company, Channing Street Copper. Copper is an induction stove that includes a battery, and through the enablement of this battery, or through the technology enabled by having a battery in an induction stove, this stove can be brought home and plugged right into a 120 volt outlet without the need to rewire or upgrade your panel, saving money for customers and also allowing for induction stoves to go into smaller, older, and multifamily dwellings. Additionally, because the stove includes a battery, it allows for battery backup in terms of power outages or blackouts. So very exciting technologies, all three of these. So along with this portfolio of three investment opportunities, we've been identifying aligned nonprofits. These logos represent just some of the many that we're looking at and doing diligence on. These represent, again, organizations doing really effective advocacy, working on community engagement, environmental justice, and broader kind of community engagement, workforce development, and kind of working in different geographies across the country. Alongside the building decarbonization portfolio, we have another portfolio we're starting to put together in the vehicle electrification space. First of all, we're in conversations with Smith Electric, which has been building electric vehicles for over 100 years, and they're seeking investment to repower diesel school buses and change them over to electric, particularly focusing in disadvantaged school districts. So we are putting together a term sheet, it's in the works, and putting together the portfolio of aligned nonprofit partners, which will be coming soon, and we'll be sharing it with our network. And now I'll be turning it over to Felix again to speak a little bit more.
Thanks a lot. So picking right up on what Daisy said about repowering electric school buses, over the last week and even this morning, I've had increasingly exciting conversations. I see a near opportunity coming together quickly. Partners on that are on Zoom with us today. So any intrigued six-figure investors, please ask us for details via the email on the final screen. Here in a nutshell is what we're about. To normalize acting in the world we're in now and the world we're heading for. To donate and invest more and pair them. And to create communities for investors and donors to inform each other and act together. Many of you are here because you know one of the four of us. And you figure what we're excited about could have a significant impact. So we're working to identify new investors and educate all investors, to promote the unique pledge you'll see in the next slides, identify exciting companies and match them with funders for equity allocations, and form or work with syndicates to pilot our model of pairing investing and donating, to identify and direct funding to align nonprofits, and to grow our network of partners. So here's how we've refined our pledge, which you'll find on our website. And by the way, high on our priority list is to build a much better website. We want investors and philanthropists to think entrepreneurially and connect their two channels of funds. We say to investors, invest more now and match your investments to donations, including ones to the ecosystems around your investments for advocacy, workforce development, and community engagement. All that can de-risk your investments. And we say to philanthropists, donate more now, even perhaps 10 times to the nonprofit you think is most effective. Imagine if all groups did that one time. Now we're looking for people who think we're onto some unique approaches that can resonate with our pledge and with people thinking entrepreneurially about investing and philanthropy. So this shows the front and back of a t-shirt with showing key partners and the regenerated and restored world we see all of us building. I don't think you've seen a chart going back to 280 parts per million from anyone making that their objective. And that's what climate restoration is about. So what we've done includes, with partnering and collaborating at our core, becoming a sponsored project of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, our first choice as a C3 sponsor. We channeled $675 million to partners, with substantial funds, especially to the Alliance for the Action for the Climate Emergency and the Climate Emergency Fund. And with my donations, funds have totaled well over $1 million. We've reached out to inspire and engage with syndicates and funds on the We Can't Wait model. We've identified scalable companies and matchmaking with investors. And we've worked with partners to identify effective nonprofits to nourish the ecosystem. Please join us to scale this vision. If you think we're onto something unique, we hope you'll join us and spread the word. You'll find a link in the chat to donate and in a follow-up email through the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and a place there to specify that it's for We Can't Wait. We hope you can help us hire a director and staff up. We're asking you to support a one-year budget to hire an expanded team. Your donations at the link can help us turn into a more effective organization. We plan to recruit as an executive director a successful entrepreneur from perhaps some other sector who wants to apply their talents to climate and can talk to other entrepreneurs, investors, and philanthropists as peers. and this will allow me to remain as a writer, ideator, and networker for the project. So stay tuned as we prove our value proposition, inspiring donations and connecting investors with other opportunities. Now I want to give a minute each to several partners and collaborators. First is Mariana Grossman from Minerva Ventures. She's relocated from Palo Alto to Portland.
Hi, everybody. I know a few of you and many I don't yet know. Felix and I met when he was doing CalCars in, I think, 2000. And so we've been long time ago collaborators and more recent collaborators. And his idea about really accelerating giving inspired me to think, yeah, it makes sense to, if we've set aside money to donate, to do it right away and in amounts that make more of a difference than just sort of dribbling out donations over time. And the same with investing in climate startups. It might be a little longer time horizon for return on investment, but will build the future. And as some of the science in that presentation said, there's no business on a dead planet. So kind of now's our time to make a difference. And that's why I've been inspired by this approach.
Next is Dan Miller from the Rota Group.
Hi, everyone. Great to hear this presentation. And as someone who's been investing in climate tech since like 2005 or so, I can tell you there's incredible opportunities for the technology to make a big difference. But in order for that technology to really grow to the level it really needs to grow, we need to have the public engaged. We need to do a lot of things that are really set. You get the policy change, which is a separate item, and that's why we also need the investment in the nonprofits as well. I just got off a call actually with David Fenton and Adam McKay. He's the one who produced Don't Look Up, The Big Short, Vice, and Anchorman, a lot of other things. And they're engaged actually in an exciting new venture. It doesn't even have a name, where they're going to be producing climate content and getting a celebrity influencer network of kind of the top influencers, and including folks I don't even know, like on TikTok and YouTube, in addition to all the folks like Meryl Streep and everything like that. So anyway, there's a lot of exciting places that you can invest, both in technology as well as in the nonprofit sector. So I encourage everyone to get engaged. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, we're thrilled to see that project that's been talked about for a while, and we hope at We Can't Wait we can find some people to devote $1 million checks to that, which is what it needs in the next 2 years. Next is Jeremy Brecker, and he's a co-founder of Starshot Capital and Work on Climate, which is an amazing community of people moving into working on climate.
Thank you, Felix. Really great to be here. As Felix mentioned, I founded Work on Climate to support the two biggest gaps we see, which is supporting early stage investment into climate in areas that are underinvested relative to the economic and climate potential. So looking at areas like the industrial sector, food and agriculture, and built environment. And then I'm also involved in trying to mobilize the workforce into climate through Work on Climate. So very excited to connect with you all and collaborate through We Can't Wait.
Thank you, Jeremy. And now for a few more than a minute or two is Carl Page from the Anthropocene Institute.
Oh, thanks, Felix. It's really great to be here and watch this ship take off. I'm with the Anthropocene Institute, and we are just trying to find ways to make sure that we can stabilize our spaceship for sure with a safety margin. So Felix is really helped describe that goal. I have been working with Felix on his projects since way back when we were working on CalCars together. He started it, and I feel like we may have saved General Motors since they had a plug-in hybrid design to justify why Congress should bail them out of bankruptcy. And, that was what we could do before any kind of electric car infrastructure was available. So why is it so radical to imagine the world that we want to live in, that we can live in, that's truly sustainable, and then work backwards to what we need to do to get there? As Churchill said, when you're going through hell, go fast. And I'm concerned that most of the environmental movement is dedicated to trying to slow down when we need to change direction. Slowing down doesn't help. So we're Silicon Valley, we live in cat years, whereas the government likes to live in decades. And we really need to be leading and mustering our strength now to change direction while we still can. We're not looking for, we're looking for an immediate change of direction. And I was really excited to meet the people at Act for Climate Emergency, their fund, and through Felix. And I've been helping with that. And I've already made a pretty substantial contribution to We Can't Wait. And I'm looking forward to doing more and being part of the conversation and mustering our strengths and getting stuff going. The approach that we have, and Felix has always demonstrated, towards storytelling and making sure people understand their place in the real solution is what's unique about this initiative. And I invite you all to join in. And we can do it. It's not even that hard. Political and social acceptance is changeable, and new technologies being brought into the marketplace will really cause the change that we need. And so thanks, Felix, for giving me this little platform. And I hope I am helping to encourage everyone to join in. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carl. And for our final short talk before Q&A, I'd like to call on Mike Milkey.
Thank you, Felix. Hello, everyone. I've known many of you for some time. I've known Felix for over a decade and worked with him in various capacities. And as was said earlier by Mariana, it's hard to know Felix for very long without being inspired at some point in terms of working with him. And he did inspire me, really grabbing a hold of this sense of urgency and acting from a sense of urgency, trying to normalize that these are not, these times are fraught with danger. There's all sorts of problems that lie ahead of us, and we need to do something urgently about climate change. In the process, building a great community, connecting with folks in the philanthropy space, connecting with a lot of the entrepreneurs that are driving change, that are developing these new technologies and trying to scale them. And the model is really changing. The model of We Can't Wait is really attacking and changing the way that investors and donors can impact the world, and really trying to tie those two worlds together. As was said earlier by Daisy, it's so important to support the entire ecosystem that surrounds your investment, not only to de-risk your investment, but also to drive the kind of change that we need and to support the type of jobs that we want to see everyone employed by in the future. So I really urge you to think about making a tax-deductible donation to the organization to support the great work that it's doing. And of course, also urge you to sign the pledge. I know that I have. Felix, back to you.
Yeah. I actually missed Stuart Cowan from the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and sorry about that. I want to bring him on before Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Felix. Hi, everybody. I'm the executive director for the Buckminster Fuller Institute. We're turning 40 this year, and we are just delighted to be the fiscal sponsor for We Can't Wait. We're seeing a strong alignment between our organizations. Buckminster Fuller Institute itself can't wait to reverse climate change and restore our climate. And we see a similar strategy. The philanthropic investment needs to go side by side with commercial investment. There are a lot of powerful ways to do it, and We Can't Wait has a really thorough, well thought out strategy. So I hope you'll consider supporting We Can't Wait and supporting the investment opportunities that they're filtering and bringing forth. Have a great evening. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you. And I do see that Scott Hassan has already in chat said he donated. We're really happy about that. So
Yes, thank you so much, Scott. And just wanting to put up the ask one more time and put the link in the chat. So you heard many reasons, many stories. And if you think We Can't Wait is onto something, if you think this idea of investing in the whole ecosystem to really meet the urgency of the climate crisis and inspiring people to give more and give now and invest and donate together. If you think we're onto something, please donate and please support so we can scale this and really protect and restore a livable climate for all of us. Thank you. Questions?
I'd be interested to hear from people who haven't spoken yet about what are they seeing as promising solutions or nonprofits or policy strategies that they're working on.
Great, thank you, Mariana. If anyone has an answer or wants to respond, feel free. And I also see in the chat, Mike put, how do you go about finding opportunities for investment? Great question, Mike. The short answer is we ask our partners who would be meaningful in that space, and we do research, and we really try and understand where are the bottlenecks, where are the limiting factors, where would donations really be meaningful to help scale these necessary solutions, and to get that feedback also to make the solutions better, right? Connecting with the community organizations that are using, that need to have their needs met to really make these solutions work, to connect with their feedback sooner in the process as well. So yes, and I see Peter.
Well, and to build upon Kimberly's answer also, currently we're a team of 3 halftime folks, and we've been sourcing these deals largely through our networks. The idea is that by bringing on more staff, we would have folks with a stronger background in finance who can do due diligence themselves, and we'll be continuing to do outreach to the broader investment community to educate the investment community and also to start building more of a deal flow. But currently, Felix has a pretty outrageous deal flow that he's been able to get. And I will say that the companies that we've spoken to have been very excited about this model, because those people who are operators on the ground building these businesses understand why having that supportive ecosystem around them is so crucial for their success. And so the companies that we've spoken to have been excited to work with us particularly, and willing to give us allocations because of that excitement about the We Can't Wait model.
Marcus.
Yeah, so this was, I'm Marcus Formerth. The question on which organizations we like that support various aspects of this. One class are sort of think tanks or research institutes like Resources for the Future, or which is in Washington, D.C., or the World Resources Institute. They do a lot of research on, for example, how carbon markets work or economic measures and so on, and then educate lawmakers about them in order to create better laws. So I find Resources for the Future particularly sort of my favorite one that I've been supporting for a long time and really like.
Peter.
Yeah, so for people who are interested in the notion of climate restoration, which is getting CO2 back to levels humans have actually survived long term, I'll pitch my book, which came out last year, Climate Restoration, the only future that will sustain the human race. And we list a number of solutions in there. Thank you, Kimberly. And there's of course the Foundation for Climate Restoration, which is working to expand on those. And there's a new foundation we have the Climate Restoration Safety and Governance Board, which is an interim group to provide the governance so that restoring the climate actually is monitored and make sure it's safe and effective. So, and if you're interested in that, you can give me contact me directly. But I urge you to read the book.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, and we have a question from Mary Jo Wilmore about whether we're looking to be US focused for investment and donation or seeking to deploy capital globally. In our current iteration, we're focused domestically, partially because of a lack of capacity to look beyond that, and partially because US emissions are, we are still the largest emitter on a per capita basis, and a place where a lot of innovation and technology stems from. And then because of all of these historic bills that were passed with all this investment capital, it's really a big moment in the United States to be able to invest in companies that are going to be able to capture some of that public sector finance. But it's certainly not something that we're opposed to, and it's something that we've talked about as looking globally because of the fact that there's the opportunity to leapfrog technologies in other countries so readily. So certainly an ongoing conversation.
So I will say that our focus initially, and talking about those 50,000 high wealth people, what everybody in the world knows that what happens in Silicon Valley, what happens in the Bay Area, must automatically be important because it's here, and we can capitalize on that. The other point about international versus domestic, I think the electric school bus project is a really important example about that, because basically everybody loves the idea of electrifying school buses. It happens to be the lowest hanging fruit, the 500,000 school buses, and dropping in an electric e-crate into those buses is something that's doable. But what's in the back of my mind on that is that that can inspire a national and a global effort to first to convert other trucks and pickup trucks and garbage trucks and other vehicles in the United States. And then that is something that can happen globally. And if they see us doing it if they see us doing e-buses in New Jersey and California and Missouri and a few other places, that can spread really fast. And so that's what we're really interested in is looking for audacious projects that can inspire people within a year or two.
And then we have a question from Julia Jackson that was put into the chat. Sorry, Valerie. She asked whether she said the clean energy transition is imperative, but so is stopping ecocide and the warp speed destruction of Earth's ecosystems. Will there be any focus on addressing biodiversity loss? At this point, again, we're a very early and small project staffed by 3 half-time people. We have a great interest on our team of looking at carbon sequestration, companies that are helping do climate restoration through locking in carbon, and that would be investing in companies that are doing that and supporting organizations that are helping do that through the nonprofit sector as well, which often can go hand in hand with biodiversity and ecosystem restoration. And I think on our team, we're all very much proponents of natural solutions to climate restoration, and we haven't yet started putting together a portfolio of those companies, but that was kind of the first thing that Felix had identified when I was brought onto the team in October as wanting to be the focus for this entity. And then we've just ended up getting these allocations into companies and other kind of sectors to start with, but it's definitely something we're looking toward in the future. And
I'll also put in a plug for the spinoff from Buckminster Fuller Institute, Regenerosity, and that is about encouraging global efforts for regeneration, and especially with ecosystems all over the place. Valerie.
Yes, I was just going to respond to what you said, Felix, a little earlier about how things sometimes start in Silicon Valley and then emanate more broadly. I've known Felix since I was known as the Green Lady in Atherton, really trying to wrap my head around how does a community of high net worth people decarbonize and be responsible about their footprint. 15 years ago, started developing programs, started Atherton's first Earth Day event, and Felix was kind enough to bring his cow car, his adapted cow car, and talk to people about electric cars and his vision for what was coming in terms of electrification more broadly. And I actually have spent a lot of time looking at how do we get people to reduce their emissions, and electrification is a really great avenue. And for electric buses, electric cars, all those things are fabulous, but they're not going to be beneficial until we have a fully green and non-carbon electricity grid. And when I looked at that problem, really delivering clean energy is the problem that we have, not so much how do we electrify things, but how do we generate more of our power reliably and cleanly. So I took inspiration from additional people in the network like Carl Page, Rachel Pritzker, Bill Gates, people who are looking at how do we get nuclear power to grow and to become more of a part. And I really want to congratulate Felix and I think members of your network on being open to the nuclear discussion and understanding that nuclear can be part of the solution. And while that is the pathway that I've taken in terms of looking at how I want to invest and where I think our more promising technology innovation is happening, I think that it's very important that we actually collaborate and continue to think of ourselves as a unified climate community. It's not just nuclear people and renewables people. We are working on this together to get 100% zero emission grids. So that's a really important achievement that Felix, I think, has brought to this whole activity. It's not just that he's trying to accelerate what people are giving and how they're acting and how they're responding, but he's actually not excluding certain technologies. He's being inclusive and broadening, and I really appreciate that about Felix's effort. So thank you for that. And I feel a part of this community as much as any nuclear community or any climate community. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will actually say that one of my favorite things I say is GMTA, great minds think alike. And when I hear about somebody who's doing something, I don't almost ever think of it as a competitor. I think of it as a validation. And when people say, so how are you different than anybody else? There's all these other groups doing this sort of thing. We say we want to partner with all of them. And we hope that all of them will learn something from us, take something from us about urgency and about matching. I think perhaps our most unique feature is that we're talking seriously to people about matching investments and donations. And we're even very aggressively talking about that. For instance, we're saying if you can invest $100,000 in a clean tech company, that means you're in a position to also donate $100,000. And that's kind of breathtakingly ambitious to ask someone, but those people can afford it. And putting it in front of them saying at this time, and you're given when we are now, as I like to say, as Alex Steffen says, given when we are now, isn't it time to really act with the urgency we need? And I really want to say also, I'm really happy that almost everybody has stayed on the call all the way through it.
So Felix, the question I do have for you is, I understand that you're now sponsored by the Buckminster Fuller Institute, but how are you doing your funds? How are you doing investments? What is your plan, and have you figured out that piece? Because I recently started a venture fund, and it's a pretty rigorous experience to be, running a venture fund. So what's your plan?
So that's important to clarify. We are a sponsor from them for C3 donations to support our core team and a very small number of other operations besides salary. We are not passing through any funds, either donations to other organizations or investments to other organizations. We our hope is to build communities. For instance, supposing at the Work on Climate community, which has an enormous Slack group that's very active, supposing there were Work on Climate waiters who said in that group, here's where we're investing, here's where we're donating, and they let us know about that. That's all we're asking. We're not trying to be a conduit for funds. We're trying to be an inspirer of funding.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and we're still figuring out the exact model, but currently for the allocations that we've been given, we're working with other entities to put together SPVs or to directly make donations to those companies. We're not at this point seeking to be a syndicate, though who knows where it might go in the future, but we're trying to keep our operations lean. And part of what we are planning to do is do outreach to other syndicates to inspire them to adopt this model and think more about beyond the investments that the individuals in their networks are making, how they could also work to identify aligned nonprofit partners that could then be supported by their angels.
So if you know any investment group and would like us to present to you about the idea of your group for its next investment, proposing to its investors that they invest and donate, we're happy to work with you on that.
Yes, thank you. And to go back to Julia's question for just a moment, Julia, if you have any recommendations for specific, or if anyone, for specific organizations that we can look into where funding is the bottleneck and where more funding would really allow them to scale the solution in a rapid way, we want to know. We want to be able to support them. So please let us know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, thanks so much for the call. Of that, less than 2% of philanthropic giving goes to the environment. Less than 1% of the funding that goes to the climate space makes it to frontline indigenous communities who are safeguarding 80% of Earth's biodiversity. And so I think that those are literally our Earth guardians, and their communities needs to be sustained. And so that's something I'm very passionate about. Happy to dive deeper into that. That's where I've been focusing a lot.
And thank you for the great work that you've been doing with the Grounded Foundation on that front, Julia.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's wonderful work.
Great. So thanks, everyone. We are at the top of the hour. We're very glad you could join us, but we will be sending a follow-up email